Heroes of Might and Magic. For me, it's a trip back to my old days because I played Heroes 3 back when I had my first PC, and I can't say I was good at it, but I did play a lot of it. And now I got the chance to play Heroes Olden Era, a new game in the series, before it's released. I skipped Heroes 4, I played a bit of 5, 6 and 7, but since Ubisoft took over, Heroes never really stuck with me for long. Maybe games weren't that great, maybe I was looking for something different, but I forgot about the franchise for a while. Last year at Gamescom, my colleagues from the German GameStar revealed to the world Heroes Olden Era, the new game in the franchise that's developed by the studio called Unforzen. I got to play the game's dev build early, interview the team behind the game, and now I'd like to share my first impressions with you. I assume that if you're watching this, you have at least the basic knowledge of the Heroes franchise, so I'll focus mostly on Olden Era. Let's begin. As any other game in the main series, Olden Era is a turn-based strategy game in which you develop your town, gather your armies, and level up your hero by wandering the adventure map of the game and fighting hostile units, or other heroes with their armies. Gameplay is divided into two elements. Firstly, exploration, development of your town, and upgrading your hero and armies, and secondly, all kinds of combat. Now, if you're wondering what's the actual inspiration behind Heroes Olden Era, then my guests today have an answer for you.
If we're talking about only Heroes games, that would be Heroes 2, Heroes 3, Heroes 5. And if we're talking like generally, King's Bounty was also like a big inspiration for Olden Era in terms of the mechanics and hexes, of course. So generally, these were the main titles that really inspired us to do what we do in Olden Era.
In the Olden Era, you'll be able to play the single-player campaign or multiplayer matches in different flavors, either against bots or other people, and in different game modes. All of that will be coming in the early access that is scheduled to release sometime this year, but we don't have a specific date yet. Since it's going to be early access, we won't get everything from the start. While we don't know a lot about the campaign of the game, we know for sure that it's not going to be the whole campaign at launch, but more on that from Katja.
Early access version will feature campaign. It won't be as rich as in the final like 1.0 version, of course. The campaign is non-linear, so there would be some dialogue branches, like an RPG system in that, so with your choices you can affect what is happening in the campaign and also in the mission as well. We're trying to give every player individuality in their choices and pay up for what they choose for. We are working in the game development, so everything can change at any point of time. However, we want to have like piece of the campaign that will have like its story. It won't be like the finished story because this is not the point, but that would be captivating enough. As a player, you will be able to enjoy the story even if it's a part of the story.
Okay, so we expect a story campaign that will be given to us chunk by chunk throughout the updates in the early access. I imagine 1.0 version will be the moment when the story concludes, unless the story is so well received that people will want more, maybe in the form of expansions. I didn't get the chance to play the campaign, so I can't really tell you anything about its quality. However, what I did play was few weeks of in-game time as Necropolis, and then I watched my colleague play as the yet unannounced faction that's called... I mean, everyone knows that the 6th faction is coming to the game in early access, but the developers are yet to reveal it and they asked us to keep it for ourselves for now. So I can't really tell you much about it, sorry. Oh, and one more thing, the game footage that you see in this video is actually a B-roll provided to us by the developers. We couldn't yet record our own footage, but I will tell you later why. Now, the basic premise of the game is the same as with the previous Heroes, and I think that's actually a good thing. The whole game feels familiar, you know more or less where to look and for what, how to fight, how to develop your towns. However, the art style of the game will take some getting used to. Not because it's bad, but because the map is much more detailed. If you think of Heroes 3, the game had a very clean look. Everything was easily distinguishable, you knew what's clickable and what's not. Sure, lots of it were technical limitations, but it made it visually accessible. Here the maps have much more detail and all the objects on it fit better into the overall look of the land, and that means you're sometimes confused whether this place you see is actually clickable and you should go and visit it, or if it's just part of the map that's here to make it look nicer. Obviously, it's not the end of the world and everyone will get used to how everything looks and works, but it might take a while. And it definitely wasn't enough for me within that short session. Also, coming from Heroes 3 with a very limited set of options when upgrading your town, I felt a bit overwhelmed with the sheer number of options for things I could build in this game. I'm not sure if it's the way it's presented, or maybe things got more complex the further on we got in the series, and I admit I'm not up to date with Heroes 5, 6, and 7, but it definitely felt a bit overwhelming for someone who's not proficient with how Heroes games handle building these days. Also, town screens, while looking pretty good, felt a bit full of elements already when you open it for the first time, and building things here didn't make such a visual impact. It looks fine, it works well within the town screen, but I think I liked the rather crude style of much older entries in the series a bit more. It was more satisfying. There is one thing that can be a bit scary for the newcomers, and that's the sheer number of systems that are at work in this game. You upgrade your town, you upgrade your units, you upgrade your hero, your equipment, your spells, then you upgrade faction laws. Sometimes it feels like the game should be called Heroes Upgrade Era. And no, I'm not trying to make fun of the game here. The fact is, it is very complex, and you can see that wherever you go, whatever screen you open, or whatever new option you try to experience. And some of these systems are old, that are coming back from previous entries in the series, and some of them are completely new.
When it comes to like an absolute novelty, the things that have not been there in previous parts of the game, in previous Heroes games, definitely the faction laws and our spell upgrade system. Those are the two aspects of our game that have not shown up before. From things that return and will be familiar to people are definitely the so-called alt upgrades. So being able to choose between one of two upgrades and switching between them whenever you want to. So people who have played Heroes 5 and really enjoyed that will be very glad to see that it's an Olden Era as well.
Now let's take a moment here because these things are pretty interesting. We know magic is here because, duh, it's in the name. So there are 4 schools of magic in the game: the Daylight School, the Nightshade School, the Primal Magic School, and Arcane Magic School. The interface for magic is stylized into constellations with 5 levels of proficiency. However, as you've heard, you can upgrade the spells, which gives an additional advantage to magic heroes. And then there's also this.
One thing that comes with our magic system is that we were looking into making magic heroes feel more enjoyable to play and a little bit more unique compared to Might heroes. So magic heroes are capable of casting 2 spells a turn if they have a unique skill that is available exclusively to them.
Upgrading your hero in this game can't be very straightforward either. You gain XP, you level up, and then you get a set of skills to choose from. If you keep upgrading a certain skill, for example, let's say the Armorer, on advanced level you get to choose out of the 3 sub-skills, and if you level the Armorer up to the Expert proficiency, then you get to choose out of another 2 sub-skills. What's interesting is that some of those sub-skills can have synergies with other skills you might pick up on the way. Again, let's have an example. If you have skill A while leveling skill B, the efficiency of skill B might be doubled. We got to make it work with a skill that added 2 health points to each creature, and because we had the Armorer skill as well, suddenly it was actually doubled to 4 points, and that makes a huge impact on the battlefield. Oh, and there's also subclasses for your heroes,
which is sort of inspired by the subclass system from Heroes 4. Namely, each hero class can choose from 2 different subclasses depending on what skills they invest their points to. This is highlighted in the game through a special icon that will tell you whether the skill you're picking is just a skill you're taking because you like it, or a skill for the subclass you're looking for.
As you might have heard in what Bart said previously, there's also something called faction laws, and I'll let him explain.
Every faction has their own set of laws that do different things and affect the specific faction in different manners. The best way to describe the faction laws would be something along the lines of a unique tech tree for your faction, whether you're playing Propolis or you're playing Dungeon. You have your own set of laws that you can treat as like an extra technology tree that you get to learn specific laws from. Now, how to do that? You basically, all you need to do is essentially play the game, because in order to gain faction law points, you just have to clear the map with your heroes, and as they gain experience, as they capture objects and such, it will generate those points. Some of those points are also passively generated by your town halls. If your game is long enough, yes, you will be able to unlock everything, but definitely we are talking about a scenario like in single player or something. Maybe there you will be able to do so. However, in multiplayer, in most cases, I don't think that will happen.
I didn't have enough time to play around with this system, but this is indeed something that adds another layer to gameplay options that you can choose from. Faction laws are divided into 5 tiers. You need to invest a certain number of points into the lower tier to unlock the higher one. The bonuses it gives you range from getting X amount of gold per day, one-time bonuses, or passives like getting 10% more XP in combat. Faction points are generated as you play, so you'll get to invest those points in it anyway, although I wonder how much freedom will this thing actually give to players, and how soon people will make build guides for the faction laws to get the most out of it. I have this image in my head that the developers go all in when it comes to upgrades, and they're a bit like Oprah, and they go, you get an upgrade, you get an upgrade, you get an upgrade, everybody gets an upgrade. And it is a bit intimidating, but I think the veterans should be happy. This is actually the feeling I had throughout the whole game. There's so many systems, upgrades, features that are designed to be used by the pros that I'm slightly worried about the newcomers to the series. Even though I'm nowhere near being an Advanced Heroes player, I played my fair share, so I knew what to expect and it felt natural. However, this game will require a very well-made tutorial to make sure that it's approachable by people who might have never played the series before. Also, by default, the map looks just like you see it on the screen, but there are many accessibility and adaptability features that will make it look more to your liking, or maybe more pro. For example, you see the area of influence, you can see the range of monsters on the adventure map, and so on and so on. There were many options that I think only pros will actually use. There are also these quality of life changes everywhere that are supposed to make your life easier. For example, in the town screen you can make a one-click purchase of all the units available to you. You don't have to click on every single dwelling and buy creatures there. But to make sure you get exactly what you want, and keeping in mind that you can have the basic units and one of the 2 of its alternative upgraded versions, you can make a preset for all the available units to recruit exactly what you want every time. Then you just one-click, boom, it's done. Then there's also small changes in the absolute details that will not be noticeable by people who have not played the game before. This is the case, for example, with the fact that picking up resources and treasures on the adventure map does not use movement points, so you basically have more range because the action of pickup itself costs nothing. One thing that seemed to be missing, especially for me as a longtime Heroes 3 fan, were the weekly modifiers. You know, the astrologer's proclaim thing. It was absent from the game, so I had to ask about this.
In fact, we do have the interface set up for this in our current build, where right now there are no effects, of course, but the interface is prepared for a week of something. Not only that, but we are also thinking about adding a month, for example, let's say a month of progress that would make it so that for this entire month you would be able to build 1 more building a day than usual. Or the month of plague, which no one likes.
Okay, but I talk and talk about lots of things. For example, I mentioned the single-player campaign, but for some people, and I think actually for most people, what is interesting is the multiplayer. And I will let Bart handle this one.
For PvP, we have 3 modes. The first one is the classic mode that everyone that currently plays Heroes 3 knows pretty well. Other templates play in this mode. You have, in Heroes 3, you have up to 8 heroes that you can recruit. In Olden Era, from what I recall, we have currently 10 heroes. This may, of course, as development goes, this may change. Yeah, it may go down, it may go up. That's really, you know, that's up to our game design team. Then we have the single hero mode, which is also going to be familiar to fans of Heroes 3, where you only get to play 1 hero, and if that hero dies, you immediately lose the game because you don't get another one. And then there's the third one, which is Arena. This one has its roots in Heroes 5 mostly, because that's where all kinds of arena formats have been the most popular. People like playing this kind of mode where you get to choose your hero, you pick your skills, spells, you pick your army, and then you just go straight into battle against another player. And that's more or less the essence of Arena as it is. You pick everything. You skip the whole economical part of heroes, and you just go and brawl with one another.
I gotta say, this single hero mode is exactly what I'll be playing. I'm really bad at managing multiple heroes at the same time, so this is perfect for me. Now, when it comes to combat itself, you obviously start by finding enemy units on the map. You see a monster, and you're informed upfront about the potential army numbers and the difficulty of the combat that's symbolized by 5 levels. This thing is clear, although the descriptions of the difficulty of the combat that appear in short phrases weren't that clear at first glance. But let's go. You decide to engage with the enemy unit and you see a potential outcome of the auto battle. You can choose to accept it, fight on your own, or retreat from combat. Let's decide that you want to fight. Combat is done on hexes, you control your own units, cast spells, but you also have this kind of initiative bar that's being filled as you take actions. This bar is filled up to 3 points that you can then spend on special skills, for example, your hero attacking the enemy unit. Typical attacks can be done in melee, where you're 1 hex away from your enemy. You can have a ranged attack that's basically done from wherever on the map, but there's also a type of attack that some units do for which they have to be 2 hexes away. What's the difference between this type of attack and the other two? Well, I imagine that if your enemy unit is a regular melee unit, they won't be able to counterattack since they don't stand right next to you. Kind of clever. Since everything is turn-based, my most often used spell was Sleep, which gave me 2 turns of peace from an enemy unit, and obviously that's a powerful thing to utilize. Playing as Necropolis, I wanted to get Liches as soon as possible, since they do not only do range attacks, but they can raise your fallen comrades. And if I understood that correctly from what the team told me, whatever I raise during combat, even if they later die again, I will still get that number of units back at the end of the combat. Liches are awesome. When I played the game and I talked to the team, one thing that came across all the time was a huge respect to the legacy of the franchise and huge understanding of the franchise. Sure, they make their own decisions, but their knowledge of all things heroes is exceptional. It's like baking a cake that is based on your grandma's recipe, but the frosting on it you make yourself. And it tastes pretty good. Throughout the years, there were many solutions to a single thing in the franchise that contradict each other, so it's always a matter of choice, and that can be the approach to building in towns or upgrading your units, and not everyone will like the choices Unforzen made because everyone has their own preferences. There's no one ideal way to do this. However, whenever they can, they try to give players options. For example, Fog of War. There's the one that looks really nicely hand-drawn, and it's the default that comes with the Olden Era. However, if you'd like a little blast from the past, you'll be able to change it into the one from Heroes 3 or Heroes 5. With all that in mind, the question that kept coming back to me was, who is this game for? Is it for the veterans of the series, or is it actually trying to get some new people in as well? How does Unforzen plan to make it work?
Of course, we want fans and people who've been following the series for many years to enjoy the game, but we also want to tap into the new audiences and show people that Heroes is a really fun and interesting franchise, and the game is really enjoyable. So with that, we were thinking about the special, easy-to-use mechanics. There will be a tutorial, we're working on it very hard for it to be very elaborate. So people who are not familiar with the franchise can enjoy the game and start the game, even though it's a very kind of rich in mechanics game. But even with that, we introduce levels of difficulties. Remember, we have 5 levels. It can be changed, but
currently it's 5, as from what I recall.
Yeah, well, it's still in development, so some things will be tweaked, but more than 3 at least. So at least you will have easy, normal, and difficult, and within them probably there will be more tweaked version of each one.
The primary thing that changes with the difficulty level are your starting resources, like in Heroes 3. We have a sort of similar system here, where your difficulty that you choose defines how many starting resources you have. From what I recall, it also affects how many creatures there will be among the guards that you fight against for all the resource hubs and dwellings.
For multiplayer, there would be matchmaking system that will be based on the rank, on the skill of the player, so you won't have to fight with like pros if you're just a newcomer.
One thing that bugged me was that the game looked as if it's still far away from being done, but it felt like it's nearing what we should be able to play comfortably when it releases in early access. The reason I'm saying that is because I felt like I'm playing a really thought out game where mechanics are polished, there's still some small tweaks to be done, but in general, it's a working game that's pretty fun to play. The reason it looked not ready is because visual placeholders were everywhere. Also, it looked as if some UI elements could still be remade into something less crude. Music was missing from the build, same goes for a lot of sounds, and all that adds to why it was not possible to capture our own gameplay and share it with you. However, the lack of music in the build doesn't mean that it's not being worked on, especially that late last year the team behind music for the Olden Era was announced and it got people excited. It's Paul Romero making a comeback to the series, Chris Velasco is composing, and he contributed to games like God of War, StarCraft 2 or Mass Effect, among others, and then there's the Polish Heroes Orchestra. And if you're wondering what the studio is up to right now,
From what I stand, I would say like polishing multiplayer. Because this is like the most the trickiest part.
Yes, currently our testers are focusing on our network stability and ensuring that it's going to be an enjoyable experience, because one of the goals we have set up for ourselves is making certain that once we release the game to the wider audience, they will not be burdened by connectivity issues, network instability and other problems like that. Something that recently has been a bit of a plague in general in gaming.
Okay, we're nearing the end of the video. I promise there's just 2 more questions that I had to ask. And the first one concerns mod support for the game.
So we're aware of the penchant that people have for modding in general. It's something we can obviously see among people that play Heroes 7, Heroes 5, Heroes 3, even Heroes 4. And some are ambitious enough to even make mods for Heroes 2. So we see that there's a huge movement across the community, across all games, when it comes to wanting to make something of your own. While we do not have plans to do that during the early access, once the game goes into 1.0 version, that's when we'll be thinking of how to approach modding, because like we have said with other elements and systems we've got in the game, we want to do this right so that people can enjoy it and feel comfortable while doing so.
Okay, that much is clear, but there's one more thing. People keep saying that this game looks like a mobile game, and I think I get where they're coming from, but seeing it in action and actually playing it, I have to disagree. Even though I do have some concerns about visibility of elements on the adventure map, I think the general art style of the game suits the overall feel of what the team is aiming for with Olden Era, and it was pretty enjoyable. Anyway, I digress, so let's hear from Katja on what's the plan on releasing the game on other platforms, and if it is heading to mobile.
So at the moment we don't have such plans. We of course want to release the game on Steam. We want it to be available from PCs, of course. We were thinking about console, but making the UI adaptable and kind of digestible for consoles is like a really something different. So we would need to, we can't do it right now. We will, we have these plans. We are thinking about that. But at the moment, yeah, PC is our main platform. And at the moment, there are no plans of releasing Olden Era as a mobile game.
So, this is it. I played Heroes Olden Era, I'm happy I played it, and I know I will try it out in early access in its more finalized form. I genuinely felt like the game is ready to play, although it doesn't yet look and sound the part. Huge thanks to Katja and Bart for taking their time to speak to me. Thank you to the Polish magazine CD Action for getting them to come to Warsaw and actually make the game available to play for Heroes fans, and for me. And thank you for sticking to the end of the video with me. I'm Michael, this is GameStar Global, and we're just beginning. Take care.